trig graphs, and I thought what we would do is start with some more shifted trig graphs, and then go over any questions that you might have after we finish with that. This first one here is y equals to a negative 4 sine 2, and then parentheses x plus pi over 2. And so with that, we know that the negative tells us we're going to reflect, right, about the x-axis. And the 4, that's our amplitude. The 2, what is that going to be?
K.
Our k, right. And since we don't have to factor anything out, that plus pi over 2 tells us that we are going to do what kind of transformation? Right, we're going to shift, good, shift left by a factor of pi over 2. Okay, so we have our amplitude is 4, and it reflects about the x-axis, and we have our k, which we said is 2. So therefore our period is going to be 2 pi over 2, which will be pi, right? So if we look at our y equals sine, and we'll use negative sine x, y equals to a negative sine x, before anything else, here's 1 and negative 1. We're not considering our amplitude yet. The negative tells us that we're going to reflect, right? So that means we're going to start going up or down?
Down.
Going down, right? Let me make this bigger. Down and then up. And so here's pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay? So we have, take a look at our increments of 0 over k, pi over 2 times k, pi over k, 3 pi over 2 times k, and 2 pi over k. And we said that k is equal to 2, right? So therefore we've got just 0 over 2 is just 0. And so we have pi over 2 times 2, right? And so now instead of being at pi over 2, now we're at pi over 4, right? So here, now instead of being at pi over 2, now we're at pi over 4. And so pi over, we said k is 2. Okay, that'll just be pi over 2. So now instead of being here at pi, we're at pi over 2. And then 3 pi over 2, we said k is 2, so that'll be 3 pi over what value for our denominator?
4.
3 pi over 4. Okay, now, so here, instead of being at 3 pi over 2, now we're at 3 pi over 4, and then 2 pi over k, we're at 2 pi over 2, so now we're at pi, which matches what we said our period was.
How come you can't just add like pi over 2 plus pi over 2 plus pi over 2? You know what I mean? Like,
You can. There's more than one way. Sure, there's ways you can do this.
Well, every time I do it like that, like 0, well, I guess you can't.
See, there's different ways. Some people look at it as dividing, but I think that overall this seems to work pretty well. But if there's a way that you can do it where some people just take pi and then divide it by 4, and and then work that way too, and that's fine too. But when you get into having pi for k, now all of a sudden it gets a little bit now where you got to do the math.
Yeah.
So this way is consistent the same way every time, no matter what k is. Okay, so now we said that we're going to shift. We said that b is pi over 2, and we're shifting left. So are we adding or subtracting here? Are we adding or subtracting pi over 2? Subtract. Okay, so we want to identify that by looking at which way we're going to shift. So that means we have to apply 0 minus pi over 2. Yeah, so that'll be, we're starting, instead of starting at 0, now we're starting at a negative pi over 2. Okay, so here's our graph, and our amplitude we said is 4 and negative 4, and we are starting at a negative pi over 2, and it's reflected about the x-axis, right? So here's a negative pi over 2. Okay, so now instead of here at 0, we're at negative pi over 2, and we're going to go down and then up like that. Okay, now the next one, instead of being at pi over 4, we're going to subtract pi over 2, and so we need a common denominator, right? Pi over 4, so we've got to apply 2 over 2 here. So this will be pi over 4 minus 2 pi over 4, and so now we get a negative pi over 4. So now we're peaking out here in the negative direction at a negative pi over 4. Okay? And so we're continuing on around. We're going to subtract pi over 2 again. So we got pi over 2 minus pi over 2. What do we get now? 0. So instead of coming back here to 0 at pi over 2, now we're coming back at 0. Okay? Alright, keep going. 3 pi over 4 minus pi over 2. And we need a common denominator, right? So we got to multiply 2 over 2 here. So that's 3 pi over 4 minus 2 pi over 4. And so we get pi over 4. So we peak out here at pi over 4. And then pi minus pi over 2. And so we finish up at pi over 2. Okay, and there's our graph. So our graph shifted to the left by pi over 2. All right? Any questions with that? All right, let's take a look at